Today we sit down with Hemant Patel, the dynamic CEO of Anumana, a forward-thinking data and analytics consultancy.
Creating a culture where technical individuals can thrive and offering a service to businesses that was sustainable and had long-term impact.
His deep interest in social mobility fuels his commitment to making a tangible difference.
Don't fear someone that is more capable than you. If they are, and you can help them succeed in their career, then great. Take that as a positive. And the worst case scenario, you're going to learn something from it.
My journey resonates strongly with Hemant's, especially our shared disillusionment with previous corporate cultures.
Businesses traditionally like to sugarcoat the truth to make sure that their teams are managed. Whereas for me, I thought, if you're employing adults, you need to treat them like adults. To treat them like adults, you need to give them the truth and help them manage it. Otherwise, how would they learn?
Witnessing Hemant's dedication to giving back is genuinely inspiring, leaving me profoundly moved and inspired after our conversation. This is a must listen to. Hemant, let's talk data.
Absolutely.
So I thought if we could start with your company, Anumana, and if you could just share the story behind Anumana and how it reflects the mission of the company as well.
Yeah, 100%. So I initially attempted to set up Anumana 7 years ago.
Oh, right.
And it came after a conversation with one of my mentors, and I was in a bit of a funny place in my career looking to advance. And he asked me a question. He said, well, what can you do about it? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I could have conversations with my line managers. I could have conversations with HR. And he was like, yeah, but what could they do? Mm-hmm. I was like, where are you getting at? He said, why didn't you start up your own business? And the fear sort of drove in me. And
How do I do that?
I was like, yeah, well, I've never even thought about that before. And he said, well, what's the worst that can happen? I was like, well, I don't know, maybe I can't afford to pay my mortgage. Mm-hmm. Couldn't you buy another house? And we just had this conversation, and he just challenged me, kept on challenging me. And at the end of it, I was like, you're right. I need to go and start my own business. If I want to take control over my own destiny, I need to start my own business. And ultimately, that's how the journey of Anumana started, from this one conversation. And I vividly recall it in my house. I didn't have a real business idea. I just had a skill set, and I had a belief in myself that I could go out. But what I really knew was, I knew that I wanted it to have an identity. And that started off with understanding that I wanted to create a business that outlasted me. I wanted to have a business that had identity, that therefore meant that needed to take away from what I could deliver, and that the business needed to create a product and have a process which would extend beyond me. I started off with a name. So obviously Anumana isn't a common word that anyone else would really know, but my heritage is Indian, and I wanted to incorporate the Indian language into the name itself, particularly in an environment where individualism isn't really celebrated that much.
Right.
But especially 7 years ago, what way to make people feel comfortable about their own personalities and their own traits, and say, well, I'm really comfortable in having that in the name of my company. So Anumana is a Sanskrit word. It's a philosophical term where past truths are used to formulate a new truth, which effectively is the whole process behind analytics. And that's where it started. The initial formation of Anumana actually didn't last that long, because I was poached from my own business to start up another business. Right. And at that time, the other CEO, he had private equity backing, and I didn't. So it was a bit of a no-brainer to go and join him. And through that experience, I was able to understand what was required in taking a company from nothing. We had our own personal laptops, no infrastructure, no data, nothing, no team. And within 4 years, that company was doing 10 million EBITDA. I grew a team of 26, and we were using cutting edge data and analytics predicated on a Microsoft Azure data infrastructure, and it enabled the company to have success. The company's success was down to our advanced analytics. And that journey was something that I wanted to replicate into the market. So 4 years ago, I had 2 young girls. They were 6 months and 2.5 years. I was at a crossroads in my career again, and I was at a point where there were certain personal objectives that I wanted outside of my career that wasn't really available with the role that I had, and predominantly that was to be present for my children whilst having success. So that's where I thought, let's rekindle the Anumana journey and start up again. And the whole premise was around offering companies data and analytics services, but really focused around that build journey. And for the first 2 years of the business, effectively, we've grown it on a pure play data analytics consultancy strategy, which meant that we've not really had a strong product. But for me, what was really important was the brand, was the ethos, was the culture. And that was true when I initially started the business 7 years ago, and it stayed true. And for me, that was around creating a culture where technical individuals can thrive, and offering a service to businesses that was sustainable and had long-term impact, but also having a company that could have greater impact than just for its clients. That was for the community as well. So obviously we'll talk a bit more about those aspects in detail, but that effectively was where the business started, and where we're up to now is that we're just finishing our 3rd year of business. Over the last year, we've worked really hard to reposition ourselves, and our focus is, from a commercial perspective, is around transforming data into an asset for organizations. So really the commercialization of data so that it can tangibly sit on a balance sheet and that it has P&L impact. So really understanding what business objectives companies have and how a data strategy can translate directly for them. And mostly we work with organizations that don't have data leaders. So we want to specialize in being able to translate complex and technical journeys and language into a really understandable conversation for business leaders. Yeah,
okay. So just going back to that early conversation with your mentor, and through that conversation he gauged that you'd suit having a business, and that's maybe what you desired without knowing it at the time. What was that from? Was there a satisfaction with where you'd worked previously?
I was looking to get promotions. I was looking to take on more senior responsibility, and I was looking to progress in my career at a rate that was quicker than what a traditional pathway would have offered.
Right, yeah.
And I was impatient from that perspective. And I think what he basically saw, and what I can see in hindsight, is that sometimes you get to your point in a career and traditional pathways aren't set for you.
Yes.
And he realized that if I truly wanted to get satisfaction from my, and I think it was capability. He was someone that always saw more than I could see in myself, and he'd always challenge myself, and he had his unique ways of challenging me. But I think he could see that, and he was trying to get that. And that point was, when you run your own business, you're in control over so many factors than when you are an employee.
Yes. Yeah.
And by being in control over those factors and having the opportunity to influence them in ways that aren't available within a working environment, then I wasn't going to, bluntly, I was going to stop complaining to him about it, and I was going to take on my responsibility. And that's something that really resonated with me. And whenever I think that's a life lesson that I've learned from that experience, because whenever I've been in a situation where something has gone wrong, or I've been sent a challenge that I hadn't foreseen, my immediate response is, what am I going to do about it?
Yeah.
I think before, my immediate response would have been to complain brain.
Yeah.
I'm just going, why did someone set me that challenge? Oh no, or just at least be on the back foot. But now, ultimately, I'm in control over it, and I can't wait for someone else to make it happen for me. I've got to make it happen for myself.
Yeah.
It's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think there's lots of alignment with our journey, because me setting up Mirai came from a conversation with a rec to rec. So I was exploring other opportunities, and she was like, you sound like you need your own business. I was like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And she knew a coach, an investor who I worked with. And then similarly, Mirai means future in Japanese.
Yeah.
And I'd spent 6 formative years in Japan in my 20s, but I didn't get to Mirai straight away.
No.
I mean, I was EJC Associates or Emma Crabtree Associates. And then it was my investor who said, surely there's something that means more. So after brainstorming with someone that I did live with in Japan at the time, he was like, what about Mirai? So I can't take credit for it, but it just means so much more, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And future, recruitment is all about your future as well.
Yeah.
So did you come to Anumana straight away, or did that take some?
Yeah, I can't take credit for. I'm not a Sanskrit scholar or anything like that. So Google helped me out in that. But the premise of it was exactly the same, and I think. I don't know about you, but it helped me think bigger about the business. If it was HP Associates, whatever it is, it's just an outlet for me to do my own work to a certain extent. Anumana is something more than that. I can, whenever I picture what the future is like, I see an entity that is operating without me.
Yeah.
And therefore, for it to operate without me, I need to ensure that it has. I'm feeding it the right sorts of attributes to grow and to nurture it, and therefore, you start to think about things that you didn't think were important before. And for me, those aspects were well, what are the principles of this organization, not just the work aspects. Well, what are the everlasting ethical aspects that I want to make sure? I was listening to a conversation with someone about culture and principles and values, and one of the things I realized was that culture isn't something that lasts. Culture has to evolve. So then, and it is particularly because of COVID. Ultimately, COVID sent the culture of lots of businesses up into the air, and if culture has to evolve with external factors, then I was trying to think, well, what is it that can still pertain? And to me, that was the principle. So values, I think, it's an articulation of what the culture is at that point in time, underpinned by principles. But then it was those principles that I needed to understand, well, what are those things that will last? And if I can figure them out and understand what beliefs are important for me, and some of them are still traditional principles, honesty, transparency, but it wasn't just what's the word, it's why is that important. So honesty is really important for me, because there's certain conversations that I've had in the past with when I've been told that I need to tell something to my teams, but I need to make sure that they don't know the whole truth of it, because businesses traditionally like to sugarcoat the truth to make sure that their teams are managed. Whereas for me, I thought, well, if you're employing adults, you need to treat them like adults, and if to treat them like adults, you need to give them the truth and help them manage it. Otherwise, how will they learn? So it's these sorts of aspects for me that I really want to get underneath the root of the actual word itself and really understand, well, what is it about that principle that I wanted to instill and ensure that is long lasting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've definitely learned how not to run a business with companies I've worked at, and you do learn those lessons. But I think I at the start went far the other way, because I was led very much by fear in my past 2 places of work. So then I went too on the compassionate side, where people started to maybe take the mick of it, and at the end of the day, you need to get that balance between respect, being firm but fair. So how do you try and instill the culture with people that join you to keep that rich?
I mean, I've been fortunate that most of the people that have joined me have worked with me in the past.
Right, yeah.
So ultimately, I'm just myself with them. We're going through a recruitment process at the moment, and for me, it's important that I understand what the culture is. So I understand what the culture is like. 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 I understand what the culture the culture starts from the initial conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm having conversations with people and I'm telling them the reasons for why we're having to recruit, which ultimately is because someone's leaving, why that person's leaving, and I'm having a really open conversation about it. Some people have said, well, actually, the reasons he's left are probably the reasons that I wouldn't want to join, and that's great for me.
Yeah.
We're out in there open. I can control certain things, but I can't control others. And if the things that I can't control are the factors that are important for an individual, then I don't want to be in a conversation 3 to 6 months down the line where we're saying, well, actually, I'm unhappy because of X, Y, and Z, which is something that I couldn't have changed. And I want to share that up front. So for me, if I can be open and honest about what I'm trying to achieve, I'm not perfect. I'm far from it. I try to achieve that balance, but reality is running a business, you are never in balance. That is probably the one consistent theme, and you probably know it yourself, that when you're ever in your business, something happens that will take you off your A game and you'll need to resolve it, which means that you're always out of kilter with that balance and you're trying to strive for it, but you're never ever going to get there. So, but as long as you've got intent and people understand what that positive intent is, then they can subscribe to that. And that's where, in previous roles, when I've built team within organisations, I've looked to create my own subculture.
Yeah.
And that's been important for me, where I can inform them what I can influence and what I can control and what I can't. And if there are aspects that are important for them and the elements that I can't control, then they need to understand that that's the case.
Yeah.
But where I can control them, here's what I'm looking to achieve, and if they buy into that, and I've been fortunate enough that I've been able to hire great people that have bought into my vision, bought into what we're trying to achieve, and wanted to be a part of it, and that's helped me retain staff for longer time periods up until where it's right for them. Yeah. That doesn't mean I'm always going to have 100% retention rates. That's an unrealistic objective.
Yeah, it is. But it sounds like that transparency at interview is key, because another mistake I made, there's been a few, I definitely oversold the role, like Mirai's great, it's this, it's that. But really, like, you want to almost put people off to a degree and see how they come back, you know, and find out early on, like, it's in recruitment, sales, it's very hard, it's long hours, you need to be resilient. You get rejected all the time, pretty much, maybe 80% of the time. And now I ask these questions and it's really interesting to see how people like step up and like, I'm ready for that challenge, or actually, oh no, that doesn't sound like me. But there's a tendency when it's your business to be like, oh, come and join the team, you know. But and have you learnt that as the interview processes have gone on, or have you always taken that approach?
I think I learned that quite early on. The way that I generally operate is I think it's a principle you learn at school: treat others how you'd want to be treated. And that's what I bring into business. So if there's something that I personally wouldn't like, if I wouldn't like someone to missell something to me, then I won't go and do that myself. So I learned that early on, and because I was able to learn that early on, I was able to see the rewards of it, and therefore it's something I've been able to take into the business. And I mean, we've early doors we made some mistakes. We looked to hire graduates when we were too young, and fortunately those graduates actually had better opportunities and they didn't stay for long, and still in touch with both of them, and I'm glad for it, because actually their careers are the better off for it. But at the time I didn't know. You don't know, like, you have aspirations and you have objectives, but the whole point of business is that you learn every single day. And there are so many unknowns and unknown unknowns that you're uncovering, that sort of the status changes as you go along. So, but I think principally, as I say, at the very least, I knew that I had to be transparent. I had to have this conversation with my teams, prospective teams, with candidates, and make sure that they understand the full spectrum, and whether that means I have to interview 2-3 times as many people to get the right person. As long as I get there and get the right person on the right motivations, and it's rarely about skill set, it's usually about personality, then that's important, and I guess that's helped me build diverse teams as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Because for me, when I'm recruiting every single role, I don't have this luxury in a small company, because it's a small company and you've got to have more. You've got to have more capability and fewer people. But when the teams that I've built were larger, when I've had teams of 25, 26, every single job description I created was unique. And a lot of that was looking at specific personality types that I was trying to create bring into the business. And for that, it's about diversity of thought, diversity of approach, diversity of characteristic, and that gives you a much more balanced team in the end, and gives you that real it gives you the ability to create that subculture within your organisation.
It does. And was that a conscious effort? Because this is a real issue with DE&I, and it starts with the job advertisements. Not only that women aren't applying because they don't tick every box, but it's so geared towards the company as opposed to what's in it for me. And even the language is quite aggressive. You must have this, you will do this, rather than, it may be suitable if you're a graduate, but if you've done an apprentice, it'll also be suitable. So putting people in a position where they can imagine themselves in a role rather than the blocker starts so early on. And again, was that a conscious thing, or do you think that's just naturally how your personality is?
It was a conscious thing.
Yeah.
But again, no one's ever asked me that question before, but I guess my personality has always been attuned to, I like understanding people, and the relationships I've built have been predicated on sort of a strong alignment in moral themes, difference in preferences and difference in likes and dislikes, but usually centered around strong moral themes that we can get along, and that's helped me build really strong relationships. And I think that's probably why that I bring that through into the way that I design the job descriptions. And there's certain things that I still need to improve upon. The whole language, it does need to be a lot more accommodating, but the direction of travel is about trying to make sure people understand exactly why they're applying, not just because they want a job. There's plenty of jobs out there.
It's very transactional.
Exactly that. Yeah. For me, it's about, well, actually, what do they want to achieve? And is this a place to help them achieve that? It was easier in an organisation where I had a big team and I could set career paths for them from day zero. I was recruiting them and saying, I'm not recruiting you for what you can do now. I'm recruiting you for what I believe you can do in the next 2 to 3 years. And I could create that journey for them. And for me, in my last role, I'd be very clear that I am looking to engage them on a 3-month period. If they last for longer than that, then fantastic. But at the very least, the investment that I wanted to put into them was so that they stay for a 3-year period, and that could help them transform their career and give them the right base and foundation to be able to be successful later on. In a small organization, it's difficult because at the end of the day, you're completely predicated on how successful the company is.
Of course, yeah.
So I can give them objectives and I can give them plans, but they go out the window depending on which way the company decides to wake up in the morning. So and what the world decides to throw at you. So but for me, the principles are still there. I try to get them involved in the different aspects of the business. I try to be transparent about what I'm trying to do with taking the business forward, so they get more exposure to clients, to conversations that can help them understand how businesses operate, the challenges that you face as a business owner, and maybe they will use them, maybe they won't, but what it does is give them a different appreciation for senior stakeholders, which will always be valuable in their future careers.
Yeah, of course. I was going to ask that then, because really it's very important for you to be a purpose-led business, but ultimately, fundamentally, businesses need profit. So how do you balance that? And has there been times when, the profit, maybe there was a client or that weren't in line with your values, and you're kind of trying to sum up whether it's good to work with them or not? Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. how do you try to balance that? It's a difficult balance. I think it's always, so for me, I like to say that we are human-centered. We're not profit-centered. So that for me is the fundamental starting point for how do we make a decision. And what that means is that when we get to a point where a decision that we need to make has a conflict between profit and ethics, then I'd like to be in a position where we make the ethical decision first at the cost of profitability. And for me, I feel like we've done that. There's a difference between survival and profitability.
Yeah.
So we have had to make decisions to ensure that the business continues, because what's the point in being super ethical if the business is just going to go into the ground? Then no one's going to get that long-term value. And for me, it's about, are we making sure we're sustainable in the way that we're offering our services to our clients, and the way that we differentiate ourselves is we have a teacher person to fish philosophy. So we're trying to create sustainability for our clients so they no longer depend on us.
Yeah. The opposite of big consultancies.
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm not a consultant. That's not my background. I know I probably shouldn't be saying this. Owning a consultancy business, but that, I am a business person. That's how I've always been inside businesses, and I felt motivated by the internal business aspect of it. So that's how I relate to my stakeholders and my clients, to try and I understand their problems, and I try and see myself in those sorts of problems. And I saw certain aspects of consultancy that I didn't like, and I wanted to create a business that did things in the right way while still offering a similar sort of service. And that's how it's helped us create our product, to really understand, well, what is it that we're trying to achieve holistically, and how can we do that with our skill set and still make that a profitable venture, because we are a for-profit organization, but profit then becomes a byproduct if our focus is around the ethical principles that we're driving and the more moralistic aspects of it. I
was going to say that is a reflection where diversity does work, because you're not from a consultative background, but in fact you come at it with a different perspective, which is actually, I think a lot of people, and I've seen this in recruitment, they become institutionalized to a way that has been done forever, and they never think to question it, you know, and rather than the idea of meritocracy, it's whoever's most senior in the business, whatever they says goes. So you've come at it from a different angle, which seems to be working ultimately.
No, exactly that. And again, it's my personal experiences. I went through a period earlier on in my career where over, I think it was a 10-year window, I had 14 different managers. So I had no stability. I had some great people. I had some less great people as well.
In there.
But the one commonality within that was that I thrived when I was given the freedom to think and the freedom to be creative and the freedom to fail. And what I realized is that, yes, I ultimately, as business owner, I will have certain decisions that I'll make. But for me, if they're at conflict with what my team are saying, I want to make sure that we have a really open conversation about it, and we understand why that conflict is. And if at the end of the day, it comes down to, I've just personally got a gut feel about it because I've had an experience and I can't explain why I think that's right, then I'll say that. I'll say that's why we're making the decision. And I feel like I get a lot more buy-in if there's that sort of honesty, rather than where I've been told in the past, we're doing this because I told you so.
Yes.
And you have that really aggressive approach to it, and it just disjoints the relationship. So for me, it's always about making sure that if there is a disagreement, it's understood why there's a disagreement. And for me, I try and take pride out of the situation. I do care if I'm right or wrong, obviously from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective, I don't care if I'm right or wrong. I'm not after brownie points to, and that means that if we do go down the route that I suggested and it is the wrong route, I'll hold my hand up and say, I got it wrong. And I want people to feel comfortable with that, because the only way in an environment with technology, it's all about advancement. It's all about trying to get to the cutting edge. And the only way that you succeed and you win in that environment is by trying something that you might be completely fearful of.
Yeah.
So you have to you have to go into it with a culture of fail fast, but learn fast as well.
Yeah, it's so true. I've been in a position where I've questioned leaders because I didn't necessarily agree with their tactics, and I think that curiosity helped me, but they couldn't even answer the question because they didn't even know why, because they were probably told to do it that way and didn't question it. And it just perpetuates itself, really. So you do want an environment where people will question things, in a right manner, but just be curious. Why do we do it like that? Have we not thought about this way? And that's ultimately what I want with people working at Mirai, is to come with ideas. I don't have all the ideas.
Exactly that. I think I read a book, James Caan, not the entrepreneur, not the actor, and one of the things he said was earlier on he learned that to grow his businesses he had to recruit people that did their job better than anything that he could, and that was something that resonated with me. I remember early doors there were some conversations I'd have with managers in the organizations, and they'll fear hiring people that could potentially take their roles, whereas the first thing that I would look to is I want the best person, and even if they did end up taking my job, well, actually I've done a great job because I'd hired someone that's actually
redundant.
Much better. Exactly that. And that's something that I taught a lot of my staff when they were starting to hire. I was like, don't fear someone that is more capable than you. If they are, and you can help them succeed in their career, then great. Take that as a positive, and the worst case scenario, you're going to learn something from it.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that's true within business. You need to make sure that you surround yourself with people that can do what you in theory could do better than you. That's the only way that it's going to grow. And if they can do it better than you, then they've probably got an idea that you don't have. So you need to create that open environment that allows that. There's been plenty of conversations I've had with my team, and they come up with ideas, and my initial thought is, I don't understand why we're going down this route. I need you to explain it. It just feels very, very alien to me. And more often than not, we said, well, you know what, let's try it out. Here are my concerns. Here are the risks that I feel are relevant. If you can mitigate against them, then by all means, let's go for it. And some work, some don't. But more often than not, the ones that work offset the ones that don't. Of course, it's so important. So in terms of the business, you mentioned that you generally partner with those that don't have data leaders. So essentially, what problems are you solving for those organizations? It's a variety of problems. The commonality is that we're focusing on organizations that want to grow. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to relate to business objectives. We try to take data out of the conversation completely. Try to understand, are they looking to grow? Are they looking to sell? Are they looking to optimize a process? Once you understand exactly what the business objectives are, then you can translate that into a data strategy. And more often than not, they are similar objectives. We doubled in the last 5 years. We want to double in the next 5 years. Great, that's a really simple thing. Or it might be really specific. We had an organization emailed me on a Friday afternoon saying, we've got too many products on our in our portfolio, we want to rationalize. Perfect, that's all I need to know. We can do the rest. We can go through the process of understanding exactly how you translate that. And I feel that's sort of representative of how I've approached my career. Early doors in my career, I made it my objective to understand everyone else's role. And when in my second role, the company was about 50 strong, and it was the culture was fantastic. So whenever someone new would come into the organization, someone would usually do the introductions. And at that time, you'd introduce every single person. You'd go around and introduce every single person. I used to love doing those because I could go around and tell them every single person's job, what they were doing. And that helped me understand how the business would operate, which then I could take into my job as an analyst and translate that into how can I give the business value. And that same principle has lasted with me now. That's the way that we approach things. How do we understand how sort of the experts within their fields, within an organization, operate to make sure that they can operate at their maximum capacity for as long as possible, because that's how businesses win. It's not data, it's not just understanding the data in itself, it's really utilizing that data to be able to maximize the capability of an organization. So it's those fundamental principles. Obviously, when you get into the technical aspects of it, there are techniques and data strategies that you have to employ, but for me, the principle that really is important is, how do I play to the strengths of an organization, and how do I allow that to happen?
So in terms of the projects you work, in terms of the timelines, is it a few months? Is it a year? Is it variety?
Generally, we're looking at transformative programs. So we're looking at taking a business from a level of capability to a new level of capability and making sure that they stay at that level of capability. So the sustainability element. So generally it's sort of 12-month programs, which are split up into 3 projects in the program, and each project's about 4 months in duration. So we can make an impact in 4 months, but we know that our maximum impact for successfully taking that organisation from one level to another is over the course of a year.
Yeah, and that's the thing, balancing ROI, because I'm sure a lot of companies, they're investing X amount of money, they want to see return on that investment quite soon. So again, is that where their honesty comes in and managing expectations?
Exactly that. Yeah. But there are ways to, previous organisations I've been in have been PE led, so we've been in high demand environments. So you know that if you go back to the board and say, well, I've been in situations in a boardroom and there was no chance I could say, you're not going to see any output in a year. I would have been fired there and then, or at least laughed out of. So you have to come up with strategies to say, well, how do I keep the board engaged in the program? And the way that the board is always going to be engaged in the program is if they see results. So we deliver in an agile format. We make sure that we're not delivering complete outputs. We're delivering capability. So we focus on, here's the framework, here's how we ensure that there's value driven. So usually we're starting to deliver value from week 8 onwards. Right. Okay. So we know that and it's not the maximum amount of value, but it's something. As you increment it, the sum of the increment starts to create something sizable. So that ROI process starts early, and then it completes, and as we get to the fruition of the project. But it's really important for me, and how when we as a team that we design, we kind of look at, well, actually, where is that client getting return? How can we bring return back into that client? I don't believe that you need to have an all-encompassing data strategy that locks your team away for an extended time frame and there's not going to be a return until they've done the job. I just don't believe that's the case. No. I think there's always an opportunity to be able to increment that value add, and that's the way we approach it.
So how do you share that success with them and keep on top of the metrics yourself from a performance point of view? We've got multiple different avenues. There's a few different ways that we look at return. One of the aspects is sort of tangible, like what can they actually see and what can they feel. So whilst it's not necessarily aligned to directly attributing profitability or operational efficiencies or anything like that, if they can understand what capability is giving them, then they know that they've got the opportunity for profitability and operational efficiency as well. So one of the ways that we try to differentiate ourselves, as I said, is about the whole teach a person to fish philosophy. So we're training them as they go along. So we might not necessarily deliver value directly ourselves, but if we've given them the capability of delivering value and then taught them how to do it,
then they can go on and do that themselves.
Yeah.
So that's one way. The other way ultimately is we try and look at what those KPIs are. So whenever we create our own a strategic document, the proposal, we focus on what the business benefits are that we're trying to achieve up front. So a business is engaged before they've actually engaged us to do the work.
Right.
And you can do that through reporting. So if we've got the ability to be able to do ROI reporting, then we'll make sure that's built into the project. And it's got to be about where it's relevant or not. We don't want to be in a position where we're spending half of our time trying to validate that we've delivered value if it's just not feasible or available. So it's about making sure that it's the right approach for the client. But more often than not, usually you could demonstrate that you're doing something quicker than it was done before.
Yeah.
And that's a really easy metric. Something that was manual is now automated. There you go. There is tangible value add. Then you can go to the more conceptual items, and then you can talk through, do you want us to report on this, or are you happy that you believe that it's helping you from a decision-making perspective? And it's all dependent on clients. Some clients say, well, actually, we know that it's going to be valuable, so we'd rather your time focused on the delivery and the upskilling rather than the proof. Some clients like that proof as well. So it's very much client-led.
Have you worked with any clients that have been burnt by bigger consultancies? And of course, I'm not saying all big, large consultancies work in a way that they perhaps shouldn't, but I know there is a tendency to lock you in and make you become very reliant on that consultancy, rather than you're quite the opposite of that. So have you experienced that as well?
Not that specific scenario, but we have worked with clients where they have had certain... They've had negative experiences with consultancies, whether it be a consultancy was very literal in what they would give and what they wouldn't give, and that meant that the client ended up short-handed and ultimately in a position where they had to pay for more. And that goes back to, we make sure that we want to be really transparent up front and make sure that's clear, and work with the client. We're trying to create a partnership. We want to help the business grow. So if there are any sort of elements of pedantry around, well, actually, it wasn't said that it was written. We try and work on the intent of it, and if it's going to be client beneficial, then we'll eat that up in our mistake. We should have considered it. If they needed it, then it should have been as part of our plan. We're about to speak to another prospective client who again has had a bad experience with another consultancy who haven't delivered what they wanted them to deliver. I think for us, we should never be in that situation. We like, that's the whole part of the process. It's designed to focus on understanding the client objectives, build a strategy before we agree to commence the program of work. And if they understand exactly what we're trying to achieve and they're bought in by that, and we understand what we're trying to achieve, our objective is to get to that achievement rather than the actual build itself. That's part of the process. So and if we can't get there, then we need to make sure that we understand why and work with the client on that. So
yeah, and going back to those commercials that are in place, again, I imagine they've always been in place. That's the way the consultancy has always operated. And they haven't thought, shall we change these? Are they serving our partners in a way that they should be?
Yeah.
And I just think it's that tendency not to change that really holds people back. But I wanted to move on because I know social mobility is very important to you. So could you just talk to us about the Anumana Code Academy?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll start off with why.
Yes.
I'll start off even further back. So I take a lot of inspiration from my mum. She's for some of my formative years, she was a single parent and she worked bloody hard. And she set up her own business that was a care business, and she wasn't an entrepreneur, but she wanted to run. And the reason she wanted to run a care business was that she wanted to make a positive impact.
Yeah,
care businesses, if you do it ethically or as morally guided as she did it, they're not a profitable business.
Right.
And she earned less money running her own business than if she stayed in full-time employment.
Wow.
But that wasn't her motivation for it. And I take a lot of inspiration from that. And I think that that's really important, that when you've got the means and the opportunity to be able to positively affect society, then I think I feel like there's an obligation to do that. And for me, that was really important. I got to a stage in my career that I could go into another director position. I could do that and make businesses really successful. But part of running Anumana for me was actually I wanted to balance societal impact with profitable impact as well. And again, that goes back to the human-centered approach. Mm-hmm. That's one of the aspects of it. I felt that I didn't feel that there was a monetary amount that could actually make as much impact as if there was something that we could offer from our skill set basis. So then I was thinking, okay, what can we offer from our skill set basis to solve some of the problems that exist in the market? So what are those problems? And for me, social mobility is something that's really prevalent, particularly in technology, mm-hmm. but isn't really discussed. So things that are discussed, diversity is discussed. We all know that the number of women in tech roles is shocking. I think the ratios, it's I think 25% of tech roles are fulfilled by females. And that's really poor. We also know that there's a data skills gap. There aren't enough technical individuals to solve the gap in technological roles required by the UK. There was a paper released in 2021. The third issue that I feel is prevalent and is continuing to grow is that with the requirements of data roles, in that, and I'll explain this in my experience. So when I started in my career 15 years ago, if you look at the number of degrees in a data team, you'd probably say there's definitely less than 1 degree per person. I reckon there was probably like half a degree per person. Yeah. If you look at the number of degrees in data teams now, I'd say that there's more than 1 degree per person.
Yeah.
So that's a real shift. So most organizations are mandating that individuals have degree level education, if not further education beyond that. But ultimately, we also know that if you are from poorer backgrounds and from less fortunate circumstances, you are less likely to go further down the higher education route. Mm-hmm. So then you've got a complete and utter imbalance in that's going to drive a greater divergence away from those from in backgrounds where they are less fortunate, and they won't have the necessary levels of success in technology. So that's something that's really important to me, that I feel is happening and will continue to happen, and is only going to get worse. Yeah. And that's what I would like to try and resolve. And that's the basis of the Anumana Code Academy. And for me, that's a grassroots problem. So statistically, I think obviously if we're looking at education, ratio of females to males in, and for me, I think the gender diversity is a representation of social mobility challenges as well, because culturally there are aspects that will stop sort of a young girl proceeding through to education because of their background. So I think that is a good metric to be able to judge why that happens. So 4-1 females to male in technological degrees at university. I think it's 8-1 at A levels and 4-1 at GCSEs.
Wow.
So you can already start to see that the problem's starting really early doors, and there's some great programs at the moment that are looking to resolve that, focus predominantly on gender diversity, but for me, I really wanted to focus on social mobility challenges as well. So the premise of the Code Academy is that we teach disadvantaged children Python. We've got a partnership with the University of Manchester, where we train volunteers from the University of Manchester to go and deliver an up to 16-week program, Introduction to Python course, to pupil premium identified children in schools around Greater Manchester, and they're usually 14 to 16-year-old. We've been running it for a couple of years. We've had about 150 kids go through the program to date. It's nowhere near where I want it to be, but principally we've proven that it's a model that can work and that has the opportunity of scale. The objective, even though it's on the course title, isn't actually to teach them Python.
Yes.
The objective is to inspire them that there is a career opportunity available that they might not have thought was relevant for them. And it's to create that connection between school, university, and career. Because I don't think many students are ready for career when they leave university, and I don't think many children are ready for university when they leave school. And I think is more that can be done to bridge that gap. And if we can wrap it around sort of the social mobility banner and focus on how do you increase the sort of educational touch points to give people better opportunities at those right levels, then that will manifest itself with greater diversity in applications to A levels and degrees, which will then continue itself into a wider and broader talent pool for the workforce.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm reading a book called Invisible Women by Caroline Corrado Perez at the moment. Okay. And have you heard about the Draw a Scientist experiment?
No.
So at 4 years old, you ask boys and girls to draw scientists, and it's about 50-50 split, men and women.
Yeah.
And then as they get older, 8, 9, it becomes like a 30-70 split towards men. Yeah. And then I think it gets to a teenager and it's about 5% that draw a female.
Yeah.
And it really does start with education. Even the word genius, a lot of people associate that with males, not females. Yeah. And, history teaches us that men came up with all these weird and wonderful inventions, which they did, but a lot of times it was females. Yeah. But, even in up to the 1950s, it's a female, whether she was a musician or she discovered something. I think there was a lady that discovered a fossil. Yeah. And in the museum, it's her brother's name, but it's often the husband's name. And, there's this subconscious bias that exists that we don't even I will have it to a degree.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's such a shame. And I think when you talk about education, it is reframing it as well. And that's the important thing. Yeah. Python makes it accessible, but also what can I do with Python aside from the obvious perhaps?
I'm grinning because I had an experience a few weeks ago in the car when so I do the drop my kids off at nursery and school in the mornings, and I love my music, so it's usually my playlist that's on the car, and what I realised was that 90% of the music that I played, it was a male band.
Yeah.
It was a male artist. And what I then realised was I've got 2 young, impressionable girls in the back of my car. If I continue to play music that I like, but is solely focused around that, then they're not actually experiencing the true diversity of music and aren't seeing sort of what the opportunity is for them and what's really important is that role model, for them to be able to see that actually there are people that are more relatable to them that they can aspire to, because if it is a man that's in the band and that's leading the band, then they might believe that actually that means that music isn't relevant for them.
Yeah.
So then I looked at the latest Spotify playlist that was female-led musicians, and it was like, and it broadened my music style. I can't profess to say that it was my personal preference in like the music that I wanted to listen to, but actually what I realised is that's not what's important. What's important is actually to set, and you're right, it's that subconscious bias. I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah,
I'd been doing it for years. But then at that point, I think sort of the whole social mobility and the diversity issues have given me an insight into role model approaches that I hadn't really thought of before. And it's those day-to-day experiences where you sort of need to normalize behavior and role models and make sure that there is appropriate diversity available. And obviously I'm more au fait with Disney now that I've got 2 young girls, and the drama around the latest Little Mermaid film, and having a black lead as the and that's the issue. People are sort of raising challenge to why do we need to change the story and have someone that wasn't, like, it was a white lead in the cartoon. Well, you need to do that so that it normalizes that there is a diversity of role model out there, so those that are from backgrounds that are less represented don't feel as though vocations and futures aren't available for them because they don't see people in those roles. And I think that's where we've got an opportunity to be able to, and that's what I'm trying to do with the Code Academy, like get good role models to go into schools. We're in Levens Hume High School, all girls school in a ethnically diverse sector, and it's great for them to see that there are females that are from an ethnic background that are doing maths and computer science, and they're the ones that are leading the program. That's just broken a barrier there.
Of course.
And for them, you never know what impact it could have, but at the very least, we're giving them an opportunity to think that there is a career and a way forward for them that is now available because they've seen someone do it rather than been told that they can do it. And no matter what, if anyone says to you, yeah, you can do it, unless you don't see someone do it, you don't believe it.
And it's these subtleties, isn't it? Like, even I'd love to look at textbooks in schools. Like, if there's scientists, are they always men? If there's athletes, football coaches, whatever it is, there does need to be a total shift. But Invisible Women, it's such an interesting book because they spoke about research that was done at Google, and they noticed that more men were being promoted. And when they looked at why that was, it was because more men were putting themselves forward for promotion as opposed to women. So then they started running workshops on how women should be more forthright and putting themselves forward more. But then they said, but why should women be more like men? Why should that be the default? Instead, we should be more inclusive with our promotion framework to include women in that, rather than saying this group of people, this is what you should do. Because then the new wave of people is just going to go back to how, there is a difference between men and women fundamentally, but the default is always male.
Well, exactly that. And it goes down to working practices. Obviously, COVID gave us the opportunity to have flexible working. You think about how many companies offered that beforehand. And fundamentally, I mean, my wife was working away from the home last week and the week before, and I had an opportunity to experience what single parenthood was like. And it's tough. It is really tough. It's tough to maintain the level of like quality of household that you want, to do all the chores in the household, to cook good food, to support your kids in all of their activities, and to run a business. It's close to an impossible job. I was dead at the end of it. And I thought I have so much more respect for single parent households. But fundamentally, the important thing for me, that understanding that, is that's where flexibility is necessary. So if someone needs flexibility because they need to take their kids to X, Y, and Z, and that's really important to make sure that they've got that opportunity, and that opportunity isn't going to offset their ability to get a promotion. Because then that is what's going to stop, particularly because unfortunately gender roles are still more prevalent, still far too prevalent in this country. That will stop women from progressing, because it's not them themselves that aren't wanting to proceed. It's the environment that's stopping them from being able to proceed. And that's what's really important to consider.
Yeah, it is. So before we move on, I just want to ask, in terms of the future, what does that look like for the Code Academy?
So we've got a few different partnerships that we're discussing in the background. Hopefully that gives us the capacity to scale. My objective is that I want to teach 1,000 disadvantaged children Python each year in Manchester.
Oh, brilliant.
Unfortunately, that means that I need to make sure that the responsibility for scaling it is off my shoulders, because I'm not capable of running two businesses at the same time. but we've got options from that.
Yeah, okay. And how about scaling or growing outside of the Northwest? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's build the model in
Sure.
Manchester, prove it works, and then we've effectively got a franchisable model, albeit it's not for profit, that we will want to roll out. The more impact we have, there's no limit to I just want to make sure it's sustainable and lasting.
Yeah.
I don't want to grow it too quickly and it just falls apart.
You want to get it right.
Exactly that. It's something that should be a staple of education for years to come.
Yeah, well, good for you. I look forward to seeing where it goes.
Brilliant.
We'll move on to the quickfire data lightning round. So question 1, what's one common misconception about data that you'd like to debunk?
It's not for, it's for everybody.
Yes, brilliant.
100%.
Yeah. Name a book, event or podcast that you think every data enthusiast should explore.
Genuinely this one.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I say I don't really follow many data podcasts or read many data books. I think reading should be more personalized. So I recommend people. I'm reading Anthony Bourdain's book at the moment. I'm really enjoying the translation between his experiences, obviously tragic ending, and what that means for running a business myself as well. So I think it's really important to find what you enjoy reading and what is relevant to you.
You can get too caught up in the idea, can't you, in the place you operate. If you could offer one piece of advice to someone just starting their journey into the world of data, what would that be?
I guess the piece of advice I give is based on recruitment process that I've had. I think it's really important to understand the fundamentals behind programming and analytics, and if you can explain it thoroughly to someone that doesn't do your job, then you'll do well.
Yes, key. Because people can get caught up too much in the technical and can't then communicate that in another manner.
Exactly that.
Finish this sentence: data is the key to
succeeding at business.
It is. I like that. And in your opinion, what will be the most significant development in the world of data in the next 5 years?
Something that we haven't even thought of now.
Yeah, that is very possible.
Yeah.
Ever evolving.
Yeah, the stuff coming out from AI is just absolutely phenomenal.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.